What I'm about to walk you through completely changed the way that I understand desire, libido, and pleasure, not just for myself, but for the thousands of women that I've worked with over the past several years. Recent neuroimaging studies have shown us something really important about pleasure. And that is that pleasure is not located in one single part of the brain. There is no singular pleasure center that just turns on when something physical happens. Instead, pleasure is a process. It's a cycle. It's a cycle that unfolds in 3 distinct phases: wanting, liking, and learning. This is huge because most of us were taught to think that pleasure, and especially sexual pleasure, is something that either happens in the moment or it doesn't. We think that if sex feels good while it's happening, then everything is fine. And if it doesn't, then something is wrong with us or our relationship. But that's just not how the brain works. Pleasure doesn't begin when sex starts, and it doesn't end when sex is over. It's shaped long before and long after the physical act itself. So to truly enjoy sex, to feel connected, to feel present, and to actually want intimacy with your partner, pleasure has to be cultivated at every stage of this cycle: before sex, during sex, and after sex. And when even one part of the cycle breaks down, desire will start to fade. And when multiple parts of this cycle break down repeatedly, sex will not just feel unappealing, but really something that you don't want to do. Now, I want to bring this to life with an example that has nothing to do with sex, because sometimes that makes it easier to just understand it a little bit better without all the emotional charge. So imagine something that you really love. For me, it's freshly baked loaf of sourdough bread coming right out of the oven with butter smeared all over it. When I think about that experience, I don't just think about the taste. I think about the smell that fills the kitchen and the sound of the crust crackling as it cools and the butter melting and running down the sides, and the memories of my mother and my grandmother baking bread when I was growing up. The pleasure of that bread doesn't start when I just take a bite of it. It starts before, when I know it's in the oven, or when I'm anticipating it, or when I'm thinking about it, or imagining how good that it's going to be. There's a pause also right before I eat it. That anticipation is pleasurable in and of itself. Then there's the moment of liking, when I finally taste it, and the crunch and the softness and the saltiness. And then afterwards, there's a reflection. I think about how good it was, how this loaf compared to the last one, what I liked more this time, what I might need to adjust in the next loaf. And here's the key part. The next day, when I remember how good that bread was, I want it again. That reflection feeds into the anticipation, which feeds back into wanting, and that's the pleasure cycle. Sex works exactly the same way. The first phase of the pleasure cycle is wanting. Wanting is fueled by anticipation and expectation. It's motivated by the belief that something really pleasurable is coming. Wanting can be sparked by something in your environment, like an attractive person, or a scene in a movie, a memory, a fantasy, or even just random thoughts. Reminiscing about a really good kiss, or remembering the way that your partner touched you that one time, or imagining an experience that you would like to have, all can contribute to active wanting. This is where something really important happens in the brain. So dopamine, which is called the motivation or reward chemical, peaks before the pleasurable experience, not during it. That means anticipation itself is where dopamine's peaking, where it's the most pleasurable. The yearning, the longing, that sense of, oh, I just can't wait. That's not just a precursor to pleasure, it is pleasure. And for a lot of women, this is where things kind of start to fall apart. So wanting doesn't disappear because you're broken or your libido is defective. It disappears when your brain stops expecting sex to be rewarding. And your brain is making that decision based on past experiences, emotional context, stress levels, nervous system states. So if sex in the past was like rushed or painful or boring or disconnected, pressured, performative, etc., your brain's going to learn that anticipation leads to letdown. And when anticipation leads to letdown over and over and over again, the brain does the smartest thing it can do. It stops wanting. That's not low libido. That's protection from something that is not that pleasurable of an experience. This is why telling women to just relax or just drink some wine or just try to be more spontaneous doesn't actually work. You can't force wanting. Wanting only emerges when your system expects pleasure. And if your life is stressful, or your nervous system's overwhelmed, or your emotional needs aren't being met, or sex feels unpredictable or unsafe, your brain is not going to generate that anticipation. It won't want something that feels costly, painful, or uncomfortable. The second phase of the pleasure cycle is liking. And this is what most people think of when they think of pleasure. Liking is the experience of the enjoyment in the moment. And it's what you feel when you're actually touching, tasting, smelling, or experiencing the thing that you've been wanting. In sex, this is all of the sensation. It's the touch and the warmth and the pressure and the rhythm and the closeness and the connection. Two things dramatically reduce liking during sex, though, especially for women. The first is being in your head. This is called spectatoring, or it could be performing, worrying about how you look, or thinking about if you're doing it right, or managing your partner's experience. All of that pulls you out of your body and away from sensation. The other thing is habituation and boredom. Even things that we like lose their pleasure when there's no variety, when there's no presence to it. Nobody wants to eat the same meal every single night, no matter how good it is. Just like nobody wants to do doggy style every single time, even if that's a position that they like. No one wants the exact same sexual script forever, even if that script once felt satisfying. When sex becomes predictable and rushed, or it's goal-oriented, liking drops. And when the liking drops, the brain takes note, and again, it starts to associate sex with effort rather than enjoyment. Presence is the key to liking, and so is novelty. Those two things together. So trying new things, changing the pace, exploring different types of touch, and allowing sex to just be playful instead of performative are all ways to keep things liking alive. Okay, the third phase of the pleasure cycle is learning. And this is the phase that almost no one talks about, even though it might actually be the most important. Learning happens after your needs are met. So it's where your brain reflects on the experience and then updates its expectations for the future. So your brain is essentially asking, was that worth it? Did I really like that? Did I enjoy it? Would I do that again? If sex meets or exceeds your expectations, your brain learns, oh, sex is rewarding, and it reinforces the wanting and starts the pleasure cycle again. But if sex falls short, if it was uncomfortable, boring, disconnected, one-sided, whatever, your brain learns that the anticipation wasn't justified. And here's the part that really matters. So when anticipation is high and pleasure is low, dopamine crashes. And that crash feels worse than if you hadn't anticipated any pleasure at all. This is why that hoping that sex will be good and then feeling disappointed over and over and over again is so damaging to desire. Your brain starts to associate sex not just with disappointment, but with emotional pain. Eventually, it decides the safest option is to just stop wanting altogether. So if you're noticing right now that this is resonating, I just want you to take a breath. Nothing about this means that there's anything wrong with you. It means your pleasure cycle has been interrupted if you're experiencing some of these things. And the good news is that this cycle can be rebuilt. Now, before I go any further, if you are finding this helpful and you're thinking like, wow, this explains so much, go ahead and just like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps get this information into the hands of women who really need it. I'm here every single week talking about sex, intimacy, desire, and relationships from a place of compassion and science. So now let's talk about how to rebuild pleasure at every one of these three phases, because this is where things start to shift from maybe being in a downward cycle or being stuck in some of these into an upward spiral of pleasure. So to enhance wanting, you have to create the space for it. Wanting doesn't thrive in chaos. It really needs room. So this means reducing stress where you can, regulating your nervous system, getting enough sleep, creating more moments of joy in your day-to-day life that have nothing to do with sex. And wanting grows through conversation. So talking about sex with your partner, fantasizing together, reminiscing about good experiences, flirting, all of those things help reawaken anticipation. Wanting isn't something that you necessarily also need to wait for. It's something that you can really actively cultivate. If you want to enhance the liking, the first step is removing obstacles. So that includes calming your anxiety, regulating your nervous system. Notice it's very similar. Using bridging activities to transition out of daily life and into intimacy. This is a huge hack. So like a shower, a walk, music, or just intentional touch with your partner can help your body shift states. Also, building a relationship with your own body through self-touch and self-pleasure can help increase liking. If you're disconnected from your body, pleasure has really nowhere to land, and it's really hard to experience that with your partner when there's not a connection here. Presence, like I mentioned before, is everything in the liking phase. So this means focusing on sensation and being in the moment. So you can do that with eye contact, with breathing, with exploring different types of sensation and really tuning in. Do I like this or do I not? So tools like pleasure mapping and exploring things that you like with your partner can really help you discover and tune into what do I like, what do I not like. Now for the final phase, enhancing the learning requires awareness and communication. So during sex, really noticing what feels like a yes and what feels like a no, so your brain has that accurate learning data afterwards to reflect on. And then also speaking up in the moment if something doesn't feel good for you. After sex, reflection is really important. So talking about what you enjoyed, what you want more of, and what you want to try differently next time reinforces the pleasure and feeds anticipation for the future. One of the most powerful tools that I have for rebuilding the pleasure cycle is something that I call sexploration sessions. Now, these are intentional, low pressure spaces that you create with your partner where the goal is curiosity and play, not performance. So there's no need to have an orgasm, no expectations, but you can genuinely get off of that 3-move script and into an exploratory space with your partner where you're just trying different things with no expectation of what needs to work and just looking for how can we have fun? How can we connect? What creates pleasure? So you can get into that virtuous pleasure cycle of liking, wanting, and learning. And the more you enhance each one, the more they enhance the other. So if you're realizing also that you don't actually know what you like or what turns you on, that's so fine. It's totally okay. Most women were never taught that. And if that's you, I created a free turn-on type quiz that will help you understand your unique patterns of desire and pleasure. It's actually linked below. It's a great place to start. Now, if sex hasn't felt pleasurable to you, again, there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that your pleasure cycle needs to be restarted, reinvigorated, and you can do that. All you need to do is start to focus on what gives me pleasure, what things in sex feel good to me, and then continuously refining and doing more and more of that. Now, if you want to keep learning on this subject, I have a video called How to Have More Satisfying Sex for Women. So this builds directly on what we talked about today and will give you some more practical tools for increasing pleasure and connection during sex. So thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next video.